I don't know if you know anything about the Greek historian Herodotus, but he identified the 7 most brilliant architectural structures of the ancient world. He called them 7 wonders. Have you ever heard of the 7 wonders of the world? Only one is left standing. All the rest have perished. There's only fragments, if anything, left of them. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, gone. The great lighthouse of Alexandria, towering hundreds of feet in the air over that mighty port, gone. Mausoleum of Halicarnassus, gone. The great statue of Zeus at Olympia, gone. The great temple to Artemis or Diana in Ephesus, just fragments and little bitty pieces are all that's left. The only great wonder of the world still standing is what? Anybody know? The Great Pyramid at Giza in Egypt. In fact, not only is it still standing, it is probably the premier tourist attraction in the Middle East. 5,000 people a day crowd into the greatest, the biggest of the pyramids. Dedicated, Herodotus called him Cheops, or the Egyptians called him Khufu. This pharaoh who lived and reigned 2,500 years BC somehow managed the stupendous engineering feat of hauling these gigantic stones, which weigh tons, each of them. They had no cranes, no bulldozers, no tractors, no road graders, none of that stuff. Only human and animal muscle power was able to haul these mighty stones together. And he assembled a pyramid, a perfectly designed pyramid on the side of the Nile River, 482 feet high. Stupendous. In fact, today, it's stupendous to look at. You got to realize, originally, it was covered with perfectly smooth limestone, and all of that was stolen off to build the modern city of Cairo. So it was even more amazing when you would have seen it 2.5 millennia before Christ. A stupendous, truly stupendous achievement, worthy of being called one of the wonders of the world. Why did he build it? What was in there? Anybody know? That was his crypt. That was his burial place. He built it partly as a monument to himself, and I'll tell you what, it worked. Everybody knows his name. Egypt is very, very proud of their pyramids. There actually are 2 smaller ones on the site, but everybody knows most about the big one, the most famous one of Cheops. But he built it as a funeral crypt in order to assist his destiny in the next life. And so he used all the skill and science of Egyptians, not only in building, but also in mummification. In that very, very dry part of the world, you could preserve a body for an unbelievably long amount of time because there's no moisture there to accelerate the decay process. And so his body, his skin was dried out and almost like tanned. They washed it with salts and sucked all the moisture out of it, wrapped him in layer upon layer of stuff. They tucked all kinds of expensive jewelry in there, befitting of a pharaoh, wrapped him up, emptied out all his internal organs and put them in jars, because obviously he assumed when the gods wake him up, they would need to know where his intestines were and where his liver and his brain were and stuff like that. So that was all in the jars right next to him. He was built into this foolproof, thief-proof vault in a gigantic sarcophagus, walled and mortared in when nobody knew where the entrances were. Well, when somebody finally cracked the code and figured out how to get in there, they found his sarcophagus room. And guess what they found? Nothing. Grave robbers had been there long before and had taken away the mummy. Nobody knows what happened to Khufu's mummy. Nobody knows for sure what happened to all those precious jewels. Probably, who knows, one of you might own one of them in a necklace or bracelet right now. And nobody knows what happened to anything else of all the gold he was buried with. There's nothing in there but a gigantic stone sarcophagus, and the only reason that wasn't stolen too was that it was too big to get out the corridor that the builders left behind. So what message does the empty tomb of King Khufu tell us? Grave robbers ripped him off. People were selfish jerks way back then, as they are now. Worrying about desecration of a grave didn't bother them. They just went and ripped off whatever they could find. In fact, that's what makes the discovery of the tomb of King Tut such a great story today, because when Howard Carter dug in to Tut's tomb in 1924, he found an encapsulated mortuary room that must have been something like Khufu's many hundreds of years earlier. And so if you want to see the mummy of a pharaoh, you can still visit the young boy King Tut, who died when he was about the age of a sophomore in college. You can see him if you want, except that now that he's been taken out of his wrappings, his mummified skin is starting to decompose, and I'm afraid your generation might be the last to get to see him. He's going into the vaults pretty soon, and you'll probably just get to see a dummy mummy in the years after this, because his poor skin can't take the circulation of air. I want to tell you, though, about a much more important empty tomb, and it has a much more powerful message to you than just he got ripped off or somebody desecrated a grave or was a grave robber. There were people who wanted to believe that Jesus' empty tomb was because grave robbers had been there. In fact, there are some people who lied intentionally, knowing that the opposite was true, but lied to keep down the true story of the meaning of the empty tomb.